My name's Flint. I'm an electrical engineer by training. Worked in oil and gas and petrochemical for a lot of years. Then did some time in high tech. Now doing a lot of environmental and community activism projects. And as Linda says, last year I actually got involved with the HEN group, their renewable energy project, and got excited about the opportunity. You'll hear today between Dan and Paul's conversations. They're going to take you through the government programs, the financial models, and that. You know, a lot of times trying to move our society and our sort of value system forward requires a lot of personal sacrifice. And in this particular case, it's actually a unique opportunity where it actually makes financial sense for you to do sort of what's right for helping to change the planet and changing our society. And the sort of combining of those two opportunities to sort of make the bold statement for you and your kids and the people that will follow us, as well as put some money in your pocket, is a wonderful opportunity. So they asked me today to limit my comments really about the technologies and that kind of stuff, so that's what I'll do. We'll do a brief overview of thermal technologies, hot water, pool heating, stuff like that. Just to show of hands, how many people are interested in that piece of technology, sort of the thermal stuff? Okay. And then I assume the rest are interested in the photovoltaic, electrical generation sort of side of stuff. Another quick sort of survey of hands. How many people are sort of at the stage of just learning about what this is all about? Technology programs and that. Okay, the majority of the room. And then I assume the rest of you maybe are kind of on your ways down. You want to talk to some of the vendors and kind of make a decision on that. And any value that I can bring to that, I certainly will help you, because you'll be very proud owners if you implement one of these renewable energy projects. They're quite exciting in that. So let's get started. As I say, I'll start with here talking about thermal technologies. I'll use this diagram a couple times through my presentation, sun shining on something and creating something. Here the emphasis has to be is what we're trying to catch is the thermal effect of the sun, the heat from the sun. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to try and take that energy and capture it and use it for, domestic hot water needs, or I'm going to use the example of pool heating. Pools are tremendous sources of heat, and if you've got a pool and you are heating it in a traditional way, natural gas or, God forbid, electricity, you'll know what those bills are like. There's a gentleman who lives near me who we're on propane in a rural setting. He uses more propane in the summer than he does in the winter because he has to heat the pool. So quite a significant amount of energy. And if you can avoid that by capturing a renewable resource like the energy from the sun, it's quite advantageous in that. We'll talk about a couple different technology types, give you some brown sort of rules of thumb around pricing and that kind of stuff. We won't spend a lot of time on this. We'll save the majority of our time for talking about the PV systems and that. So this is the outline, sort of a schematic and a bit of a diagram and photograph of a typical domestic solar hot water system. A couple collectors placed on the roof of a house. Fluid circulating through those collectors and into a heat exchanger and probably a storage tank of some sort. So really what you're doing is you're taking advantage of putting fluid through that panel. The sunlight shines on those panels, warms the fluids. We then transfer that energy from that fluid that's flowing into a standby tank, and then most systems will still have a traditional hot water tank that you've got today. But instead of having to heat that water from the cold temperature, that same temperature of the water that you put in a glass to drink, it's only being heated from the temperature that this tank has already achieved through the energy of the sun to the final temperature you might want in your home, 140 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that. In a summer situation, you might not even need to top up the tank. If you're conservative about your water use, you can probably provide all your domestic hot water needs simply with the energy that's produced on the roof. Which is tremendous. The second, next to heating your home and cooling your home, the second largest use of energy in your house is domestic hot water production. It's huge. And that's why simple things like wrapping tanks and insulating pipes and stuff like that can all make huge differences around that. These systems typically, because you want to use them year-round, have to have some technologies around how they handle freezing. Some will drain back the fluid so that there is no fluid in the panels if it's too cool. They all have to have some intelligence with them. There's no point sending fluids through these panels if there's not enough heat energy up there to actually warm the water hotter than the temperature it happens to already be in the tank. So we do have to have some sophistication around plumbing and that kind of stuff. Two major types of collectors, evacuated tubes, and I don't apologize, I can't call out the vendor's name, but I saw a little example of the tubes out there in the foyer. You can take a look at them. Think of them like a thermos, the old glass thermoses, nothing insulates better than basically a vacuum, and that's what the evacuated tubes are taking advantage of. In very round numbers, cost about $4,000 per collector installed in a house. Typically, a typical family dwelling to meet your domestic hot water needs would probably need 2 collectors, so you're looking at about an $8,000 investment. Very round numbers, very round numbers. There are flat plate collectors, which are typically just really circulating cavities or tubing between 2 sheets of polychloride or plastic of some sort. Much cheaper, but don't generate nearly as much heat. They aren't as effective at capturing the energy from the sun as much as the evacuated tubes. They really are the Cadillac of the system. Typically, you do need to use some sort of antifreeze in these systems so that you don't have problems with freezing when it's cold. And as a result, there are fair rigid bylaws and plumbing requirements to be sure that the fluid, the glycol fluid flowing through those collectors doesn't mix with your hot water and contaminate your potable water in your home. So there is a fair bit of, you need a licensed plumber to put this in, you need to obey with local building codes. And every municipality does have slightly different sort of rules about what those requirements are, unfortunately. And typically you do have to have an extra tank sort of put into your property to make it all together. This is a picture of a large-scale installation. This is actually a cooperative housing project in Toronto. And not-for-profit cooperative housing costs are always a matter of premium, and they've really been able to make a dramatic impact in terms of their housing costs by putting in this kind of system. And this system pretty well provides all the hot water requirements for that facility. Laundry, everything that you can sort of throw at in sort of a multi-unit installation. But that's a very typical picture of sort of what the systems look like. Let me turn my attention quickly now to the pool systems. You can see that the collectors here are very simple. Typically just 2 pieces of, as I say, vinyl with water circulating amongst them. You can see some of the piping up from the pool and the pool pump that exists. A lot of times you don't even need to add extra plumbing. The pump that you have to circulate the water in your pool typically will have sufficient, depending if you're not going up multiple stories and that, enough energy to push it up to the roof, and you don't drink the pool water, so you don't need to worry about the fact that it's flowing through these plastics and that back into the pool. It doesn't change the taste or the odor or the impact of the pool water or whatever, but it's very significant. These are much less expensive, maybe $1,000 to $2,000 installed. As I said, your existing pump can be used in terms of moving that. You don't need antifreeze because you drain them in the winter. So when they're decommissioning the pool, you take the water out of the solar pool heaters, etc. And that. And if you're using gas or electricity, it really makes a difference. The average sized pool can use as much heat as really a medium-sized home. They're incredible sources of sinks of heat in terms of the energy that they take. All right, so just a couple technologies. Basically, that's all about capturing the thermal energy of the sun. Now what I'd like to do is to switch streams a little bit and really spend my majority of time talking about this, which is really about photovoltaic systems. The idea of taking voltage or creating electricity directly from the photons associated with the solar panels. So again, we've got, my schematic looks kind of the same, the sun shining on something. But, it sounds silly, but I'm going to belabor this for a moment. But here it's really about the light energy. I actually had a gentleman that I was consulting with, had the privilege to work with, probably several dozen homeowners now to put these kind of systems in. And he was absolutely convinced that what he wanted to do was to take his, I think it was his dryer exhaust, and he wanted to vent it up on his roof near these panels because he wanted to produce the maximum electricity he could in the winter. And, clearly these panels need to stay warm. I scratched my head and I scratched my head. We associate light with heat and heat with light. But in this particular case, we got kind of an odd thing going on. These panels will actually produce the best when they're cold. On a cold February day, when it's like minus 20, you'll get peak energy production out of these panels. Now, in February, the sun isn't up very long, so we don't get a lot of production over the day because we have short hours of sunshine. But they produce the best. So you really like this to be cold. So there's no thermal effect here going whatsoever. Environmentally, if you were to look across the globe, if we could get some of these panels and we needed some of this electricity up in the Arctic, where you had long days of sunshine, Cold, dry air without a lot of cloud cover and stuff like that would be the best place to actually place them. It turns out, just to fast forward, Cairo, Egypt, on the globe, if you take into account meteorological conditions, the amount of cloud cover and environmental conditions, the amount of sunshine, and that is actually advantageous. But don't let that put you back in this trap of heat. It just happens to be hot there as well because there's so much solar energy hitting the ground. But it's not the heat that does it. So the light shines on these panels. If there's a physicist in the room, you'll kill me for this, but it's the best way to describe it to people. Very familiar with light-emitting diodes, LED flashlights, LED stoplights on cars and that. We put electricity through some silicon, a silicon diode, and then it's light. Think of this process in reverse. Shining light on the diode, and it creates a little bit of electricity. And it's just a little bit. You'll see these panels always shown as like a collection of these little squares. If you go out and look at the panels that some of the vendors have brought today, you'll see they're all little cells. We put these cells into these panels. We connect series of these panels together, and through that combination, you get enough electricity that's worth talking about and doing something with. A panel's probably about a meter and a bit, well, you can see them out there, about a meter and a bit high, maybe 3/4 of a meter wide. It'll produce somewhere around 40 to 50 volts. Panels are rated at about 200 watts. So to do anything really interesting, you think about, 100-watt light bulb. So one of these things would do 200-watt light bulbs. To really generate electricity, you're going to have to put a group of these things together. The panels produce what's called DC current, direct current. It's the same type of electricity you get out of a flashlight battery or a watch battery or anything like that. A car battery is DC service. This world we live in runs on AC, alternating current. So what you need is a device called an inverter to switch the DC to AC. And let me tell you right now, the heart of your system, then the systems really are very simple, panels and inverter. Yeah, you need some racking to put it on the roof, and you need some wiring to connect it. You might want a control system to look at what's going on with it and that. But spend your money, invest your knowledge on understanding panels and the inverters. That's the key, the heart of your system. And frankly, about 60 to 65% of the cost is right there. Ignoring, labor makes up another 20, 30%, and then bits and bytes the remainder of it. So, sunlight shining, power being produced, lots of these things in connection with each other, making an overall system through an inverter, and then immediately, you'll see my little diagram shows it being shot out what's called an export meter to what we call the utility grid. And I heard a couple of gentlemen out there speaking it, so I know this is being covered on the floor out there. But the nature of the programs, as will be described to you later by Paul and Dan, is you want to sell every ounce of electricity that you produce. The Green Economy, Green Energy Act, really its heart, its engine, what drives it, is the fact that the government is willing at this point in time to overinvest in renewable energy projects, to pay a premium price. So you want to sell all the electricity that you could possibly produce because you're going to get paid a premium price to do it. You then continue to use your electricity as you would today, bringing the power back in from the street through a meter, same meter you have on the side of your apartment or side of your house today, back through your breaker panel in the basement, up to various outlets that you use. And the key is, not to steal the gentleman's thunder later in the day, is there's probably about a 7 or 8 time multiplier between the price you pay for the electricity you buy and the price that you get paid for the electricity you produce, and that's what it's about.